three chords that we can kind of use the Hendrix style double stops with. So the first one we're going to look at is the C chord. So we're going to go C, F, and G, just a 1, 4, 5. So the first chord is C, and we're going to think about C as like your bar chord right here. This is the typical way a lot of players would play it. Now, one of the things you want to think about is how we can invert this chord. And if we can invert this chord, then what's going to happen is we're going to have access to all of our major pentatonic. So what we're going to do is, instead of thinking 3, 5, 5, 5, we're going to raise this up 2 whole steps. And that's the third of the chord. So now we can think 7, 5, 5, and 5. Now, what's cool about this is that now we have access to our C major pentatonic really easy. Like that. And since we have access to that, and this is really the bulk of our chord, then we can take little pairs. So what we want to do is say, take the 5 of your B and G, and we're going to hammer from the 5 to the 7 of the G. And so you get that little double stop. Now we can take this and keep rolling it down. So we're using our major pentatonic scale, but as we just keep going down. So we got that G and the B, hammer the G. We're going to go D and G, and that time hammer the D string. And we go A and D and hammer the A string. And then you could even resolve right back to your regular C chord. So and an easy way to do that is, this is the chord you're used to anyways. So an easy way to do that is take the chord you're used to and then slide that ring finger from 5 to 7. So that way, and you're right there. And you can get really creative with these. There's a million ways that you can play these. Like that. All right, so that is one way to look at the C chord. Now, the same way, we actually use a lot of these same ideas. If you have ever played maybe your C chord and you play it like right here, and then you kind of hammer that middle finger, that's really not it's really not that different that, see? And then you could also move that middle finger and catch the B and the G together and hammer that G to the 2nd fret. And that's the same. So there's 2 ways to kind of do the same double stop. The cool part about playing it around the 5th and 7th fret is you have a little bit more access, say, to bending the strings if you wanted to. So if you want to kind of get a little bit bluesier with it, maybe bending the G on the 7th fret, that will kind of hint at that minor third or that kind of bluesy sound. Right there. So those are 2 ways to look at your C chords. Now, let's go to the F chord. So we'll kind of do the opposite here. So we're going to think about the F first, like this. And one of the first things to think about in that kind of Hendrix style is using that thumb for your bar chords, because it lets you use some of these open, especially like say down for F, it lets you use some of these open strings. So it's a really simple double stop that even Hendrix used a lot is just opening up that F chord on the 3rd string and then hammering it back to that 2nd fret. So that's essentially what he's kind of playing, is that B and the G together of the F chord. And so that it's not a lot of, that way it's not too much motion with your left hand, really. And you could resolve it down to that D string, like that. And that would work. Keeping on with the pentatonic theme here, if we take our F and we think of 1 and 1 on your E and B, then we could hammer that B string to the 3rd fret. And that's a good way to flow into the other lick. So that's a great way. You could also use the exact same idea we did with the C chord. So if we find our F chord, it'd be here on your 8th fret of your A. That's our F. That's how we plug it in. And then we've got our 10 of the D, G, and B. So we take that, we go up 2 whole steps, right? So there's our inversion. And now we can use the exact same tricks we did, but this time we're just going to be following our F major pentatonic, and that will work over your F chords. And I think I would, if you wanted to go all the way back down the neck, you could, but that's it's pretty far away. But it does work. Now, the other way you could get some of these double stops would be, we're going to think about our D shape. So you've probably at some point, everyone knows a D chord like this, and you probably at some point maybe you've played a D chord like this. So that way you have 3B, 2G, and 4D. This is a movable triad. This is why it's really good to know your note names too. So we know that's a D, then we know this is an E, and that's our F. So it's an easy way to plug in some of your chords. So we have F here at thinking 6, 5, and 7. Because we have that triad right there, we could also get some licks just based off this chord shape. That totally works. So I'm taking the G on the 5th fret, and we're going to hammer that and then come back. So we're thinking B and G, we're playing those together. And then I'm thinking the 5th fret of the G and the 5th fret of the D string. Okay, so that's a C and a G, and we're going to hammer that D to the 7th fret, which gives us an A, which is it's a chordal tone for the F chord. So, and then you can resolve it there on your 8th fret of your A, and that's an F. So. You could climb back up to, this is where you can get really creative with this, because there's a million ways to do it. So there's a few ways that you can do the F chord. With the G, we're going to do a lot of the same thing. So G, you can think of your open G like this, and a lot of players will do double stops based on those open positions right there. So, and that works. But what we could do is spice it up a little bit more. And this is a really common way that we can approach the G. So this is the same thing we did with the F, right? So F, kind of plug it in just by your root right there on the E string. So you get your G, right? And then we can go over and do that same D chord shape we thought of. But this time it's a little bit different. So if we play this, that's a D chord, and we don't want that. We don't want that F sharp in there. That's going to sound kind of weird. But what we can do is use it like this. So an easy way to do this without having to stretch too much is we can think of 3 and 3 for our G. We hammer that 3 of the B to the 5 of the B and come back to 3. Now we're going to go to 3 of the B and 2 of your G. And we can let go of the G to an open. And then hammer that 2 of the G to the 4 of the G. The A here, this A note, is kind of acting like a sus in that G chord, or a little bit of a color tone. So we're kind of passing through it. We go to a G, which is naturally in the chord, and then we end up landing on the B, which is the 3rd of our G chord. So, and then if you can hook your thumb, you can even get that bass note right in there and just kind of fill it out. Now, we could also do the same thing with the G, and we could think about like we did with the C and the F. That also works. And if you look, you're all on the 12th fret. So, and that's where all those same open G licks kind of come from. But it does kind of have a different sound. Now, the other way you could do the G is think about the other trick we use with the F, and this is your D shape. So now, if we think about those note names, then that 8th fret of the B is our G. So we have 8B, 7G, and 9D. And that's the G triad. So since that's the G triad, all the same licks that we just did from the F totally work. Now, the trick to this is trying to flow from one chord to the other, and that's really where, Hendrix was such a master at all this. But have fun with it and get creative and try to experiment ways you can connect one shape to the other.